Gravity, elevating solutions.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Just to check, a quick sound check. Can everybody hear me? Please give me a thumbs up or a high five, or if you feel at liberty, you can drop me a heart just to make sure that everybody can hear me.
We can hear you, Heinrich.
Great, thank you. Great. If your hands are up, you can put it down. We don't want you to sit with your arms raised the whole morning. Your arms are going to get tired. I think we've got people all over Africa joining. So far east, west, north, and south, and even further abroad. So if you want to drop your name in the chat box and the city that you are from, just so that we can all see the audience that we have here this morning. So it'll be great for me to also get interaction from everybody on the call. So throughout the morning, you are welcome to leave your comments in the chat box and ask questions. We're going to have a very interactive and exciting session. So I think if you've got questions or comments, please drop it there in the chat box. And also throughout the session, give me a thumbs up or give me a high five if we're doing well. Also, the other presenters would appreciate just some feedback. My name is Heinrich Schroeder. I'm dialing in from Pretoria, and this is the third Gravity Master. Sorry, this is the second Gravity Masterclass we are having this year. They say there are only three types of people in this world: those that can count and those that can't. At least I'm part of the first group. So this is our second masterclass. The first recording can be seen on YouTube, and I pasted the link in the chat box. So you're welcome to check it out. Obviously after this session, not right away. And in our previous session, Barry Niemand from Vodacom had a discussion about a monopole fatality that they had. And it was I was in fact on site to assist with a body retrieval. And it's a very unfortunate event, but it is great that we could look at that event and learn from it. So thanks to Barry and also to everybody that's doing their presentations today. You'll notice your mics are off, your cameras are off. It's not that we don't want to see you or hear you. Andrew Eady did speak there to us just now. It's because he's one of the presenters. But as I mentioned, please leave your questions and comments in the chat box. I always say this, it is recorded, so leave your opinions about Donald Trump to yourself. So you will also see in the chat box, I've got two other links. So the first link is the video for our first session that we had. Then I've got our LinkedIn page there. If you're not following us, please do. It's in the chat box. And then I've also got a safety survey link in the chat box. So you can scroll almost right up to the top and you'll see the three links there. Don't fill in the safety survey just yet. We will handle that a bit later in the morning's proceedings. So yeah, let's quickly have a look at what can we expect today? So I mentioned my name is Heinrich Schroeder. I'll be hosting this morning. Andrew Eady is going to talk to us. Andrew's from Nokia. He's going to talk to us about some past events and certain things that we can learn from these events. So very looking forward to that one. Johan Strauss, my colleague, will talk about fall protection planning. And how that applies not only in South Africa, but in Africa as well. And then Ryan, also my colleague, will be delving a bit more into a practical aspect. So looking at gin poles and how gin poles can help those in the telecom sector with their lifting operations. So that's the agenda for this morning, obviously, and then we'll have some time for Q&A afterwards. What I want to do before we jump in, I want to say that you're going to have a lot of emails and WhatsApps and phone calls coming in throughout this morning's session. And if you are going to get distracted and be at different places, you know the saying, you are not neither here nor there. And I want to encourage you this morning to stay focused. I am convinced that what we're going to be saying this morning and the information that's going to be shared will help you and will spark ideas and will give you just a little bit of an extra toolbox with knowledge in it to know how to handle certain situations within your organization and how to affect change in your organization. So stay focused, stay tuned, and you will definitely gain something out of this that will help you with your work. So without any further ado, I think I can ask Andrew, maybe so long, to step up to the stage. Andrew, can you hear me?
I can hear you clearly. Can you hear me and see me?
I can hear you and see you. Thanks, Andrew. So before Andrew jumps in, I quickly want to just introduce from my side. I think he can also further his introduction, but I've worked with Andrew at across Africa at various stages. We specifically work together on the Lifting Safety to New Height event quite a lot. So I think the majority of the people on the call knows about lifting safety, and also work with him on other occasions. But I can honestly say that Andrew's got this cunning ability to get the message across, to affect change for the last mile guy. And I'm using Andrew's words here and Nokia's words here, the last mile guy, the person with the boots on the ground. And Andrew's got this ability to affect change all the way through to the bottom. So thanks for joining us, Andrew. He's currently the head of health, safety, and security. I almost said of health, safety, and Superman at Nokia, the mobile infrastructure. And Andrew, over to you, and then you can maybe do a quick introduction and jump right into your presentation. Thanks.
Thanks, Heinrich. Again, hopefully you can still hear me. Let me share my screen. Heinrich, tell me when you see my screen, please.
Yes, feedback on serious incidents and lessons learned.
Yeah. I'm not big on introductions for myself. I think, Heinrich, you've done a very good job there. I certainly would never ever call myself Superman, that's for sure. However, thank you for the kind words. I'm now going to go on and talk about the simple brief that Heinrich gave me. He said to me, Andrew, we're running these master classes. Can you give me an overview of a couple of serious working at height incidents that we've had in Nokia, that you've had in Nokia, and the lessons that you've learned on those incidents? I says, yeah, of course I can. He said, be prepared, there'll be a lot of people here and they'll be listening intently. I said, that's fine. Now, my initial thoughts were, we'd just go through a couple of incidents. But that will not do justice to this meeting. It will not do justice to this masterclass. It would give an overview of a couple of incidents. What it would not do is look at the reasons that we're still seeing far, far too many serious incidents in the telecom sector from working at height. So what I would like to do is spend a couple of minutes, a few minutes, and go back to basics to try and understand why people do not follow our life-saving rules, Nokia's life-saving rules, our standards, our procedures, our non-negotiables. And there's three reasons why people don't follow our life-saving rules, our procedures, our non-negotiables. The first one, and this is where Superman comes in. When you're young, you think you are Superman. You think you're indestructible. And you don't know there's risk there because you've not had the practical experience as you get older. You think if you fall down from a tower, it's like the movies. You'll just be able to get back up again and carry on. Unfortunately, it's not like that. When you reach my age, you've done the job many, many times, but nothing's ever happened to you. So you think to yourself, well, it's not going to happen. I'll just carry on and I'll just do what I do because it's never been a problem before. Or indeed, many, many times I hear across the world, whether it be Muslim, Christian, Hindu, right across, well, we trust in God and God will look after us. The second reason that people don't follow our procedures, our non-negotiables, our life-saving rules, is they don't think that people will see them. So therefore, there's no problem. We're not going to get caught. And then they also think, well, even if we do get caught, there's no consequences. Now, later on in this meeting, we will go through a couple of incidents and we will cover off about they do not think it will happen to them or they don't think anyone will know. And if there's no consequences, even if they do know. And the third, and it's directly relevant to the majority of people working here, is everyone thinks that if they cut corners, it will save them time. They do not understand the consequences of their actions by cutting those corners. Indeed, they also understand after an incident that it hasn't saved time. It's cost a lot more time. So those are the three big reasons. And I have seen them across the globe, in Africa, in Asia, in Latin America, in Europe, and even in North America. Some of the last two that I've just mentioned there, we think of these as more mature when it comes to health and safety than Africa, Asia, and Latin America. They're not. They still have these three reasons. So what do we do about that? Well, I'm not about policeman approach because the policeman approach doesn't work in telecoms. It might work in factories where you've got a defined area. You can talk things through and you can see things and you can monitor it. That doesn't happen in us. We've got tens of thousands of small factories every time someone goes to a site. 2, 3, 4, 5 people at one site. So we can't use a policeman approach. We have to change hearts and minds through monitoring, training and messaging. We have to push the correct buttons. And every time I go to a site, I talk to the teams, the last mile person, the last mile guy, and talk to them. And the conversation becomes more of a discussion rather than me telling them and them listening and being afraid that the big boss from one of the companies is here to find out what we're doing and what we're doing right and what we're doing wrong in their minds. So I asked them about what would happen if you fell. And then they come back to they do not think it would happen to them. It won't happen to me. It's never happened before. So then we move on and we ask the question, so how many times have you seen free climbing? And they say, I never free climb, never do anything. I say, no, forget about you or the team you're working for. What about others that you see in the industry, working in other sites? They say, oh, well, yeah, we see it sometimes. So what percentage? And the percentage that they tell me varies between 30 and 80%. That's a huge amount of people free climbing. A huge amount of people not following our life-saving rules, our procedures, our non-negotiables. Then we move on and we ask them the question, or I certainly move on and ask them the question. So if you free climb, or someone's free climbing and they've fallen, what's going to happen to them? And then they'll accept, yeah, well, they probably won't get back up again. And I say to them, well, it doesn't matter if they don't get back up. And they look at me with big wide eyes. And I say to them, because they're no longer with us. But who's going to look after their wife, their young children, their parents, their extended family? And that's the buttons that we push, and that starts to change the hearts and minds, change the mindsets. We've also got the training that we consistently refresh. And that stops a person like me who's old, who's done the job for decades, and who doesn't think it's going to happen, so that I'm still aware of what we should be doing right and what we shouldn't be doing. We then move on to the next one about supervision, monitoring and consequence. I remember going to a site and I asked the person, so why were you free climbing? They said, well, we didn't think anyone would see us. I asked the supervisor, the team leader, so why did you allow them? Well, I was doing this and I wasn't watching, and they come up with all sorts of excuses. In essence, they weren't supervising. And well, as I said, I will talk about consequence later on with respect to what we can and cannot do. Let me be very, very clear about consequence, though. It's not about taking the big stick and beating up suppliers, beating up people. It's taking an apportionate, appropriate response. People think it's quicker. When an incident happens, a serious incident, it can take weeks and weeks and weeks. It can stop and does stop projects. Costs money. So the time saving from cutting corners really, really isn't there. What can we do though? We can maximize our deployment of AI, artificial intelligence and machine learning, to make sure that it's quicker and easier to do the jobs without cutting corners. Nokia is supporting with the digitization rollout. And again, you'll see more about some of the good things that we're doing to help and support that in the future, in the very near future. And we also minimize the benefits of cutting corners. So those are the three big areas that we need to focus on. And again, if you're at your laptops, your phones, take a screenshot of that. I don't mind. In fact, what I'll do is I'll ensure that the presentation, these slides are available for all of you, because the more that we get the message across in these three key areas, the more that we focus on changing hearts and minds, the more that will keep people safe. Now, let me try and get my laser working now. No, it's not. Laser pen pointer. This is a typical tower that you will see across the globe. This particular tower was not in Africa, but it's not dissimilar to many, many towers that we see in Africa, probably slightly smaller. There was a three-man team that were working on this tower, and it's fairly congested up at the top. So this is the crown, if you look at it there, and this is the crown here. They were working in the crown. They deployed some new antennas or replaced some antennas on this crown. They've done the job. And the person I'm going to be talking to you about his name is Jose. And we must always remember the names of the people involved in our incidents. Remember what I said in the last slide, make it personal. If we just think of it, well, someone fell, someone lost their life, then it isn't personal. So Jose was working on this tower. He was 32 years old. He had 3 children, a young lad and 2 daughters. And he'd worked in the telecom sector for many years. He was experienced. He was competent. He was an asset to the telecom sector. He was an asset to the supplier, the company that he was working for. And they deployed the equipment and deployed the antennas. And again, the antennas have got bracing on them. You can see the poles there, and where they're connected to with the brackets. They had deployed the equipment. Jose was part of the team that deployed the equipment. And then the team leader said, Jose, go up and take some photographs, because we need to send the digital evidence in that the job has been completed and to the right quality. Jose had never taken photographs before, but he said to the boss, "Yes, boss, no problem." So again, he climbed the tower and he got up. And the way that he took his photographs is he put his 2 feet onto this hole here, and he put his double lanyards on here. And he was trying to take the photographs of the back of the antenna. And he struggled, because every time he took the photograph, it came out blurred. He wasn't getting it right. So he leaned back, and he leaned back further and further and further. And then he lost his footing, and his feet slipped off the bottom pole. At which point, everything happened in microseconds. For Jose, it wasn't microseconds, it was like an eternity. He slipped, he fell, and as soon as he started to fall, he went into what I call the fetal position. So he brought his hands together, hands to his chest, and his feet up to his chest as well. He somehow or other managed to get his feet back onto this bottom pole and climb back up. He had secured himself with his lanyards. So he did everything absolutely right. Again, his colleagues, the 2 people on the ground, heard Jose scream, and they were looking up. They could see him initially dangling and then climbing back up onto the tower. And after a couple of minutes, and it felt a lot longer than a couple of minutes to the 2 people down on the ground, Jose climbed down. And the team were traumatized, never mind Jose. You can imagine what state Jose was in at this point. They got Jose and they took him home. His wife was waiting on him. His 2 children, his son and 2 daughters were waiting on him. And they sat around the kitchen table, and there was a lot of tears, a lot of crying in the family. Then the children went to bed and they got up the next morning. And Jose was still talking it through with his wife at the table. And the children came to him and said, "Dad, we don't want you to go to work. We don't want you to go to work climbing towers. We want you to come home every day." His wife said exactly the same to him. Jose's never worked in the telecom sector again. And I said to you at the start that Jose was an asset to the telecom sector. He really was. And we lost that asset. The good news is Jose is still with us. Now this one's a slightly different one. This was in Africa. And it was a tower that was getting constructed. And there was a large team of people working in this tower. You can see 3 people on the tower right now. And again, if you look at it, none of them are using their lanyards. They've got them on. The company that they work for has spent a lot of money giving them harnesses, giving them lanyards, training them, doing everything that was right and appropriate. And they're working without using them. Heinrich, when I start this, please confirm to me that you can hear the sound as well.
Okay. Yeah, I can hear it.
Now, the brief that was given by Heinrich was to talk about serious incidents. And I've deliberately kept away from what I will call the very serious incidents where people have lost their lives. In both of these incidents that we see here, nobody was hurt. The first one, Jose went home to his family and is still with his family. In this one, the three people were free climbing. They had had the training. They have the equipment. You can see them wearing the equipment. There was two supervisors at this site. There was a construction supervisor, team leader, and there was a team leader for the rigging and lifting section, which is where these three were working. The supervision wasn't effective. The project was stopped when we saw this. The customer was fully informed and fully engaged in the investigation. So what did we do? Well, we certainly didn't suspend. Well, we suspended the supplier for the time being, but in the end, the supplier still works for us, and I'll explain that as we go through this incident, the story of this incident. The three people were interviewed that you see there, along with the team leader and others. And we asked them the question, why were you free climbing? Why weren't you using your equipment? And we got the same stories. Well, we didn't think there would be a problem there. We always do it this way. And that goes back to the 30 to 80% of times that people free climb, despite the training. When we work for other companies, we free climb. So why then were you wearing your equipment? What was the purpose of that? Well, we're told to wear the equipment. You're also told to be fastened. Well, there was not a problem. We wouldn't fall. So we went through the scenarios. It's quicker. We went through the scenarios that they didn't think they'd get caught, that the monitoring wasn't there, the supervision wasn't effective. Then we went on to the fact that, well, if I fall, I'll be okay, because God will look after me. And we had the conversation that God will look after us, but God also expects us to look after ourselves and help him as well. And the final comment from one of the people there, after he'd run out of all other reasons as to why, was, well, the devil made me do it. At which point we gave up. We weren't going to change their hearts and minds. What we did do is we discussed this with the supplier. The supplier had given them training, both to the supervisor, the team leader, and the team. The supplier had given them the right equipment. The supplier frequently checked the equipment. The supplier had done monitoring and hadn't seen them doing this. But they knew the supplier's team were coming out. They just didn't know that someone would see them this time. So what we did with the customer was that we ensured that these people were barred from working again in the telecom sector for both Nokia, the customer, and the customer's suppliers, which is Nokia and others. Was that right and that reasonable and that apportionate? The straight answer to that, all those three things was yes, yes, and yes. So these things will happen. They will get reported. We need to investigate them. We need to ensure that we put in controls to stop these happening, so that Jose and these three people here that you see doing what I'm not even going to call unsafe acts. It's a lot worse than that. Dangerous climbing never happens again. Heinrich, that is now me finished. I will hand back to you. Importantly, I know that everyone is on mute. Please, if you've got any questions, put your hands up and we will try and either unmute you or put the question in the chat and we will answer that. Grant Bishop, you've got your hand up. So we'll see if we can try and unmute you. I'm not sure whether you can do that, Heinrich.
Andrew, and Grant, if you don't mind, can we keep the Q&A for the end?
Of course.
For the end, and then Grant, you can so long drop it in the chat box, and we will get to that after the presentations, if that's okay. Andrew, thank you so much. That was excellent. What I always appreciate is the fact that you bring this home and you make it personal. I can hear a story on the news of, there was a bus accident and multiple fatalities, and it's sad to hear, and it's you think to yourself, oh, that's tragic. But it's so far removed, you're not grieving or mourning. But what you're doing here, Andrew, by putting a name to the person, brings it so much closer home. I always think if I have a family member or a loved one or someone that's a close friend that's working in the industry, and I have the ability to make it safe for that person, I'm either the safety manager or the CEO of the company, and I can make it safe or unsafe for that person. It changes the picture totally. If you think to yourself, well, this is a loved one, I'm going to really try and make it safe for them. So thanks for that, Andrew. Next up, we've got a colleague of mine, Johan Strauss. While Johan unmutes himself and steps up to the stage, Johan's been working at Gravity for longer than I have, and I think I've been here for about 120 years, if I'm not mistaken. So you could just imagine how long Johan's been around. So Johan, thank you for that. I can hear your mic is working. Johan is a qualified engineer. He's been in the work at height industry for many years as a trainer and consultant, and he's also serving as the safety manager at Gravity. So with all these specialities that Johan possesses, you could just imagine he's quite an atomic bomb when it comes to the working at height consultation field. So Johan, tell us what you've got to say to us today. Thanks.
All right. Thanks, Heinrich, and thank you everybody for joining us. So my brief for the day was to have a masterclass in fall protection in terms of defining a blueprint for the fall protection plan. So if I think back and I let's look at Henry Ford, for instance. So he developed the blueprint for the production line. He was so good, in fact, that in the First World War, they used these principles to get people to the front. And then Toyota took that over, and then from that blueprint, they improved on that. And they even used Yamaha, which is a different company altogether, to make engines for them for one of their performance Lexus motors, which is world renowned. So I think there's definitely a value in using a proven way of doing things. So for lack of a better word, I call it a blueprint for a fall protection plan. So the rest of my slides will then have a look at what is that blueprint. And I aim also to add on to Andrew's part of the supervision, monitoring, and consequences. With this blueprint, there will be some access of aspects of that included, as well as hopefully, if the blueprint is easy and the supervisors understand the risk, it will help them change their mindset so that we've got proper training for them, monitoring and just communication with them because the full protection plan is easy to understand. All right. Okay, good. Let's go to my next slide. Okay. So if we look at a typical OSH Act, the employer's duties. So first we look at what does the employer need to do. So in almost 99.9% of all countries, the Occupational Health and Safety Act says that the employer must provide and maintain a working environment that is safe and without risk to the health. So the employer owes this continuously to every employee, and it cannot be discharged by doing an induction and say, okay, cool, you know the risk, go ahead and be safe. So secondly, there's a duty to the task. In other words, the employer needs to ensure that the work is performed under the general supervision of a person trained to understand the hazards. And I think that last part for me is very critical. That if you understand the hazards, then you understand the consequences. So it's really important to be able to do that, and sometimes it's hard for a person to, in that moment, to understand a hazard, but that's why it is also important that we have a supervisor and we have other employees working with us, that they can highlight the hazard for us before we expose ourselves to that. And critically, my personal message is that the supervisor specifically must understand the hazards. The worker's certificate does not replace this. So that's some of the key things in this blueprint that we need to remember. And our supervisors will need to have take that as upon their shoulders, and also realizing the consequences, what will happen if they don't take it on their shoulders, as Andrew has mentioned. So our blueprint, like the Henry Ford production line, is going to be from the South African Construction Regulation 10. And it gives us a good way of developing a full protection plan. And as Andrew said, in the telecoms industry, we are involved in many nations. I have seen the construction regulations of many other countries, and for me, this is the clearest way of using that blueprint. So you can add to it the same way Toyota did by saying to Yamaha, give us a great engine. But I think this is the minimum, and I think it's also the best in the world, if I have to say it like that. I think there were a lot of clever people with glasses and white jackets, and some old women with calloused hands from working in the construction industry when they developed this plan. And that's why I base my faith on it, because I know it works. So point 1, we discussed. Point 2 is align it to the local law. And that's very critical. If your law says that a training certificate, for instance, is only valid for 2 years, then Africa is tough, or the world is tough. That's what you stick to. And lastly, the thing that's critical and why we have to involve our supervisors is that we need to keep those 5 controls working on site every time we go to site. So let's have a look. So we've got a full risk assessment. That's the first thing. Then we have to have some sort of medical fitness procedure to decide if this guy, we'll discuss it in detail a little bit later. I don't want to get ahead of myself. Let's look at the 5. So it's full risk assessment, medical fitness procedure. Then there's a specific training program based on the task. There's a specific equipment management procedure, and lastly, there's a rescue plan. So these are the 5 controls. They are quite easy, and And if you base your fall protection plan on this, I can guarantee you will have a successful fall protection plan. So let's have a look at the fall risks. So we need to, as developers of this fall protection plan, we need to be able to identify the dangers during each task while workers are exposed to a fall risk. So that's very important for us. So how do we do that? We look at the task steps, for instance. Typically in a baseline or issue-based risk assessment, you go through the steps, get on site, pack it out, and you look at all those areas. And if one of them tells you that the worker has to climb up a cat ladder and walk onto a unprotected platform where there's a chance of falling over the edge, then that will be a hazard. So that brings us to the next step. And then we'll look at the exposure and the likelihood and consequences of that hazard occurring or influencing the person. And with this likelihood and consequences, we typically decide on high, low, and medium risks, just for the purpose of deciding which one to tackle first. But in general, you have to have you need to know what is the likelihood and what will happen if this hazard now exposes my person. And the last one is there needs to be a control method. So you can either cover many hazards with one method, or you can, depending on the task and the situation, you have one control per task step. And to sum it up, so understand how each hazard can expose an employee to harm. So that's the critical part of it. So that's not only for the fall protection plan developer, but that's also to the site supervisor and eventually the whole team. And then we have to define the procedure and methods used to address every risk identified for that task and location. So that's important, because when we change locations, the risks and the hazards change with us. When we change our tasks, the same thing happens. So this is the foundation of the fall protection plan, this risk assessment. If we miss a hazard in this thing, then there's a big likelihood that our fall protection plan will have gaps in it. You've all heard about the Swiss cheese model. So this is the biggest one. Any small hole in this cheese slice will grow exponentially as we continue forwards. Number 2 is medical fitness. So if there's no valid fitness decision, then sorry, there is no fall risk work. And by valid fitness decision, I mean that somebody needs to check the person. So typically it'll be in our case, it'll be an occupational health practitioner, and that is signed by occupational health medical doctor or person. So that's important, and the reason for that is I need to identify any previous medical conditions that may lead to an incident at height. Now, like with Jose, let's say Jose had a high or low blood sugar and he passed out and then he fell. So we want to protect the Jose's and make sure that they don't fall and then be caught by a fall arrest system and the consequences leading up to that, as Andrew has said. So there's a first check, and then when do we do it again? Typically that's annually. We do an annual medical. Then what do we do if the certificate expires? Again, if there's no valid fitness decision, no fall risk work. So if your procedure says the person must have a valid medical, and that certificate expires, so technically there won't be a big change between yesterday and today's expiry date, but the procedure is critical to implement and enforce, and so that we don't allow that gray area to grow, because if we allow that, then the gray area will grow and grow and grow bigger, and eventually it will be 3, 4, 5, 6 months later on. Then the records need to be kept of that that medical fitness decision, and it's in most countries is a legal requirement, but it's also in this case in the blueprint it is also very good practice. Then the last thing that's I think will make the biggest difference is the daily fitness. The same as a risk travels or is different from site to site. The same is from day to day. The person who works at height, his well-being will change. And when I say well-being, it's not something that somebody else can assess. So there is a responsibility on the worker to go to the supervisor and say, listen, I'm not feeling well today. I had some really bad food yesterday, or I have a family emergency, and my mind is not focused currently. So then the supervisor makes that decision to say, okay, cool, today we will allow you to be a ground worker, and please stay out of the exclusion zone. And then we'll relook at the situation tomorrow, and if you feel better, we can go. But it's also important then to record that decision in your daily pre-task risk assessment or DSTI. So just to recap, there must be a valid medical certificate of fitness or a medical declaration of fitness in order to make that valid fitness decision. So that's the second part. We need to have that quite clear, and that somebody looked at that and says, yes, Saki, you are medically fit, or your well-being is okay for this day to continue. The second part is a training program. So we have to look first at the task, because the definition of a competent person really relates very strongly to the task he is performing. So if I am doing rigging work, that's my task. So that means I need to have competency training for the task and the access method. So if I'm doing rigging training and if I'm doing rigging work and I'm using fall arrest by climbing up a ladder, that'll be my access method. So in terms of the fall protection plan developer, it is his job to look at the training, to develop a training matrix, look at the task and what competency is required. That person needs to go for training, and he needs to go for assessment, and very clearly it must be a competency assessment, not just any assessment. What I mean by competency assessment, I mean there's a list that you will need to fill in, and then you observe the person doing specific things. And there's a knowledge questionnaire where you test the guy's memory and his understanding of the hazards and risk. And the crucial word is here, understanding. And then typically, again, most OSH acts will require you then to either authorize or appoint a person specifically for a certain task, like a construction site supervisor or a rope access supervisor. Then the records need to be kept and they need to be updated. Now, the next point, and the reason why I'm hesitating is the fact that this is probably also one of the biggest things that can affect change in the hearts and minds of people. Because if we practice what we've learned, if we practice how to reassemble a rescue kit every 3 months, or if we do a workshop for continuous professional development, that is something that is critical. And I think that's something that really needs to have a foothold somewhere in your fall protection plan. And with all the logistical issues aside, it's probably one of the most difficult to manage. But if you get it right, then the main principle of having this person who works on site and having the supervision on site know what the hazard is and know how to check if a rescue kit is assembled correctly before work starts. Then you'll have a review and a new update. So there's my training program, and it starts with the training matrix, and second to last, the important thing is the workshop and the practice that must happen regularly. And to close it off again, the OSH Act requires employees to be informed, instructed, and trained by a competent person before work starts. So it's very important that whoever trains your people, you need to be quite sure that that trainer is competent. Not just the training provider, but the actual trainer. Because the OSH Act is very clear. It says that the person who is doing the training must be a competent person for that specific task. Okay, let's move on to our equipment management procedure. And again, here we're using the blueprint of the construction regulations 10.2D. But when you develop your own plan, you can just remove this last part. As long as you've got an equipment management procedure heading in your plan, I'm happy with that. So what does this procedure do? It controls the gear from the selection to the destruction process. So I need to choose my equipment, and it is quite important here that the person who writes the plan must dictate to the buyer on what equipment he prefers. And that will be according to the training he has received. So if a person who receives a specific course training, it is ideal for him to get that exact equipment for using at work. If not, we'll discuss the blue line when we get to it, but it's critical, especially when you're doing rescues and intricate items, that you select your equipment per task and as per training. Then you have a mark and you register that equipment. You inspect it either every 6 monthly or interim inspections. That EN code tells us that if there's a big hazardous environment that you are using your equipment in, like painting or anything that can affect your harness, you will need to then increase your inspection intervals. Imagine a person doing hot metal work. His inspection time for his harness will be probably weekly, versus a manager or supervisor who climbs a site once a day, for instance. Then is the procedure to, if you find something that's broken, you need to quarantine it, inspect it, and then immediately be able to have stock to replace that item. So you'll have to prepare for that and have some stock available that you can replace it with. And like I said previously, the inspection frequency also is determined by the manufacturer, the OEM, the original equipment manufacturer instructions. And that's, for me, it's one of the most critical things that we sometimes forget when we do the equipment management. When you get that little booklet of yours that the manufacturer or the supplier needs to supply to you, because it's a regulational requirement that you have that booklet, put it into a file that you can refer to later, or go onto the internet and download that booklet and save it somewhere so you don't have paper issues anymore. Then anybody can then draw back on that instructions from the OEM to see exactly what is the operating conditions of that equipment. So ultimately, it must be safe use, storage and maintenance, and follow instructions. Okay, I've got 5 minutes left, and I've got 2 slides left. So hopefully I can manage that. So And again, like I said previously, this last section for me is probably one of the most critical things. And I see there's a lot of issues that arise because the full protection plan developer or the equipment inspection and manager did not properly follow this through. So whenever you get new or different equipment, the users must complete a practical workshop to demonstrate their understanding of the safe use and foreseeable misuse and consequences of that specific item. So it is very critical for this because sometimes there's small changes in the equipment and small things can happen that will cause you to misuse. And if you don't understand the consequences, you won't manage that correctly. And then lastly, the last section of the plan, I've got 3 minutes, is the first part for me is the main thing that for protection plan developers need to look at when they do a rescue plan. We have to look at the scenarios. So by scenarios, I mean, okay, so now we've got a site. It's a rooftop site, but there's a cat ladder going up. So, and then on top of that rooftop, there's a small antenna mast that the guy can climb up. So if I'm looking at my rescue scenarios, you will use probably a fall arrest system to climb up the ladder. So he can be stuck somewhere in the ladder. And then when he climbs up the tower, he can also be stuck somewhere in there. But the total height from the top of the tower to the ground is 50 meters. The building is 30 and the tower is 20. So you can see if you don't properly plan for that, you will get the guy onto the rooftop and then what? How do you get him down? Do you use a stretcher or whatever? So this scenario is very critical and it needs to happen daily for every new task or site that you are on. And then the rest of the rescue plan is easy. I've got the fall happens, there's people who rescue you, you've got the right equipment, and you've got a task rescue procedure as per the scenario that you've identified. Okay, so my last slide is, again, it's as per the requirements of our construction regulations. You have to communicate it, and by communicate here, I mean with top management and supervisors and the worker on the ground. You have to implement it, you have to confirm it on site, you have to amend it where needed, and you have to maintain it in terms of those 5 things we talked about. What will trigger a change? A legislation, a different task, a different site that we haven't done before, different team, different equipment, different conditions, and lessons learned from incidents. So my take-home message is a full protection plan must stay current and effective on site and not just be filed somewhere as a necessary evil that needs to be maintained. All right, I think, Heinrich, hopefully you are happy that I've reached your target.
Yes, Johan, indeed. Thank you very much. You have. Just one question. How do both you and Andrew have these nice little pointers that you can show us where you're pointing to on your screen? How do you get that?
Okay, so can you see on my screen, if you go to the left-hand corner, there's a little round button there. And if
Okay,
you
get it
click
there.
that, yeah, that's where you get the pointer.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks, Johan. This is great. Thanks for the information on the full protection plan. As mentioned before, the full protection plan is a South African legislative requirement, and I see there's a lot of hands going up for you and thumbs up, Johan. So the crowd appreciates you very much. The full protection plan is a legislative requirement in South Africa, and it is one of our success stories within the work at height space. And essentially what we're saying here is that it doesn't just have to stay a South Africa success story. It can be a success story for your company, wherever you are, in Africa, outside Africa. Call it a fall protection plan, call it a fall protection policy, call it a work at height standard or policy for your company. It doesn't matter what you call it, but the end of the day is, do you have those 5 things in place? Do you have a procedure for the training, for the medical evaluation, the gear management, and so forth? So you could definitely implement that within your company. We do have a fall protection plan development training. So if you are a safety manager or a CEO of a company, you wish to do it, you can give us a shout. We can assist you with training so that you know what is the basic principles of the fall protection plan and how do you implement it on site. Johan, once again, thank you so much. That was very good. We've looked a lot at theoretical issues. Rihanna, I see your hand is up. If you wouldn't mind dropping a question in the comments block, and then we will get to that afterwards. Almost done. We've looked at a lot of theoretical aspects and administrative stuff with a fall protection plan. But the end of the day is we have guys that's climbing towers. And when you climb a tower, it's not like sitting in an office. You know, you've got other antennas on the tower that's sticking out, and you have to navigate your antenna past the others. If you've ever worked on towers, you'll know sometimes with a little bit of wind, the tower is swaying left and right, and you get seasick. That's not something you thought about sitting in the office. For me, the biggest thing is when I'm doing a rigging operation and my ropes get stuck in the thorn bushes just because there was a little bit of a breeze. So these things are practical aspects, and we can theorize about it and look at the administrative requirements as much as we want to. But at the end of the day, it is a practical thing. And that is why I asked Ryan. Ryan, if you can step up to the stage and mute your mic so long. I asked Ryan just to talk to us a little bit about gym poles, which is something that we use in the industry to have a separate anchor point. It's quite noisy there, Ryan.
It is quite noisy. The training going on in the background is quite intense.
All right. No worries. We'll just talk over them. So essentially, Ryan's going to talk to us about that. Ryan is a level 3 rope access technician. You've been in the industry how long, Ryan?
13 years and counting.
13 years and doing quite a lot of rope work. I believe you worked offshore as well. I think.
Yes, I worked in the Baltic Sea quite a few years ago, but worked there for about a year. Very, very cool experience.
That's lovely. Ryan, thank you so much. And I think we are looking forward to see what we can learn about gym poles and how it can improve our operations. So over to you.
Perfect. Thank you. Camera on, yeah?
It's up to you, mate.
Ah, cool. Can you see me?
Can see you. Yes, thanks.
And can you see my screen?
You can see it. Yeah, perfect.
Yeah,
thanks.
So we're good to go. Thank you very much, Heinrich. I appreciate the opportunity given to me to be a part of this Gravity Masterclass. It's quite nerve-wracking. You know, I've got years and years experience climbing, but not really that much experience speaking to so many people. I think at one point there was 424 people on the call. So thank you very much for the attendance. It's really great.
No pressure.
Okay, so
yeah, it's 415 now.
Oof, nice. So talk about being in the right place at the right time. And what a great time to be here. It's exciting to see what is happening now, and it's exciting to see what the future holds, especially with everything that Gravity is involved with, the innovations, especially with the gin pole. And the gin pole is something that I'll be talking about today, the benefits of using a gin pole. I don't want to talk too much about myself and my feelings, so let me continue with the presentation. Okay, let's work on a problem statement. So firstly, we're going to talk about congested towers. We're going to talk about lifting to the top of tower and getting loads above your highest point. So I want to talk to you about your possible problems on site. You may or may not be aware of this, but many of the telecom towers are very congested, very busy. I think Andrew did show that quite nicely earlier on in the presentation. And no management, safety, and the site teams are blatantly aware of this and of the struggle getting new equipment up the tower past existing equipment. So antennas, transmission equipment, dishes, the like. That's one of the problems. Lifting to top of tower as well. It's quite difficult, seeing as though at the top of tower, if you're using the structure as your anchor, which most people do, you can't necessarily get the antenna that you want to install at top of tower past that point without some help, some engineering help. So, yeah, there is a need for installations and equipment to be taken up to the position of the top of the tower. So why not use the right equipment? Teams do sometimes take unnecessary risks. They might apply the manual handling techniques as well as the rope rigging techniques to be able to lift. And that would entail, say, a team lifting the antenna up. And once it's reached the highest point, loosen the rigging so that the load that they're carrying has the ability to be moved. Then they start to manually handle it to lift it higher than that point. So it is fair to assume that that does happen. It makes sense, logical sense, especially when I talk about it now. So in this scenario, it puts that equipment in a free fall position, and that load could drop. And if it drops, you're going to shock load the system that you're using. You possibly are going to damage the equipment you're trying to install, as that is a very high possibility, and cause harm to the person or people that is involved with the activity. So yeah, I'm going to touch a little bit more on the gin pole a little bit later on. But lastly, for the tower builders, you guys know who you are. You legends of industry, you build the structures that we use to climb, to install our systems. And yeah, thank you. You guys lifting leg members above your head can't be easy. And I don't have the experience of doing a tower build, but I'm told they're between 150, 180 kgs easily. The bigger towers are a bit heavier. And now getting a 5-meter leg that's that weight above your head when there's no anchor. The obvious answer for me would be a gin pole. And yeah, because that's quite a challenge. Nevertheless, let's touch on rigging principles before I go further on to gin poles. Okay. Rigging principles. Always be in control of your device, your controlling device. Never stand directly below the load. Ensure the lifting route is clear. Oh, sorry, excuse me, I'm a bit lost there. Of obstructions, there we go. And ensure that the slinging is done in such a way that the load could not exceed the working load limit of the gin pole that you're using, the safe working load of the slinging gear. Always deviate from the bottom of the tower and use rated or sufficient anchor points for the planned lifting operation. Remember, at least 2 competent riggers or slingers must be on site, one at the bottom and one on the structure. Now you can imagine the guy on the bottom, if you only have one, can't really control what's happening on the tower and vice versa. So minimum of 2 required on a site. And remember to use rated or sufficient anchor points for the planned lifting operations. So just consider that as I carry on with the presentation, that it's very important. It's needed for the gin pole to be safely installed and effectively be used for its intended purpose. Okay, so you can see there on this slide, we have a great picture, network installation on the left. It's so good I had to share it twice. And the one on the right, which is our tower building photograph that's taken. So you can see clearly on the left, we have our technician, Lucky. Disclaimer, Lucky is connected safely. He's connected to a temporary vertical lifeline. He's just a couple of minutes before the photo was taken, installed the gin pole. You can see that 3-meter gin pole in use on the photo on the left has a 1-to-1 pulley system orientation, and it is connected by 2 slings, a green sling and a purple sling. And then just above the gin pole, you'll see there's another rope heading towards top of tower. Now that rope is installed to the gin pole to be able to lift it safely and lower it safely. So it always remains connected. It's a simple 1-to-1 again, with the device at the bottom of tower, descender to control the load safely. So it took about 10-15 minutes to install the gin pole. Everything's done on the ground. You lift it up once. You need 1 technician to install it on the tower, and you're good to go. Considering you do still need to do a test lift and lower just off the ground to make sure that everything is correct. And if it's not, put the load back down safely, fix what you need to fix, do a test lift and lower again, and then you can, once safe to do so, proceed with your lift or your planned lift. So on the right, it's a much bigger gin pole. That gin pole is 9 meters, and I think it takes a bit more than 1 person to be able to install it. It'll take a team of riggers. But what a wonderful device. You can see clearly in that image that the anchor point is much higher than the actual structure that's being installed. Much higher. So that gives you that vantage point, that opportunity to safely lift the load that you need to lift in a controlled, safe way to where it needs to go. Oh, this is one of my favorite photos. So this is AI generated. Sorry. We chose this image because what a beautiful thing to see. Please note, at Gravity, we do not condone working at night. This is primarily going to be used just to emphasize a busy tower. And yeah, as I said before, what a beautiful way to display it. So if you look carefully, if you can see in the dish that's facing us, there's quite a few bullet holes. I don't know why AI decided to put bullet holes into that. That's what we assume it is. So this must be Johannesburg. So let us assume that this tower requires a new antenna to be installed, okay? And it needs to be installed here. Now this is top of tower. You can't really rig anything above that. Maybe for a 5G upgrade, this existing antenna needs to be removed and a new one needs to be installed. Now the path, as you can see, is not very clear. It's congested. It may be even more congested than this. So what would you do? The idea is you would do it the way you taught. You would do it the old-fashioned way. You'd set up your rigging. You'd do it correctly. You do your lifting plan. You do all the planning on the ground before you put yourself at risk or your team at risk of working at height. And then you execute the plan accordingly. And there we have the opportunity to share the option of using a gin pole. Now, the path is a lot better, and I'll explain this a little bit later on when using a gin pole. Because the 3-meter gin pole is modular. The design uses adjustable or swappable components like the slings to fit almost any telecoms tower. It also has the capability of allowing at least a meter above top of tower, so no unsafe manual handling and rigging combinations will be used. So from this point of view, it's only one perspective. And only once you're actually on the tower, ready to perform your activity, well, you see that the path is not very clear, it's not very straight, and you need to move the load from left to right to get it past. But with fixed rigging, you won't really be able to do that. With the gin pole, it is possible. So that begs the question, how do we get the equipment there safely? Okay, so before I get there, let me show you the two gentlemen in the image. So I'm going to call the one on the left Bob and the other one Joe. Now Bob is pulling the load and Joe is controlling the load, the tagline operator. Now they have to get that load safely past all the other all the other components on the tower to top of tower for installation. But Joe cannot, as you can see in the image on the right, pull the load excessively away from the tower because he's applying unnecessary forces to the top anchor point. When he does that, he's fighting against Bob. They're not working together anymore. They're fighting each other to get the load up. But the end goal is to get the load up safely. I'm no expert in telecoms equipment, but I'd imagine telecoms equipment is very expensive, a couple of $1,000s, if not more, for new equipment and existing equipment. So it'll be quite expensive. And I wouldn't want to be Bob and Joe if they had to damage not just one, but multiple telecoms equipment on a tower. I'd do my best. I'd really avoid it. And I'd hope there would be something available for me to use to do so. So let's say at this point, Bob and Joe have the load 3/4 of the way up, approaching the equipment on the tower. And Joe is now, because the load's closer to the load being lifted is closer to the anchor or the rigging point at the top, the highest point, it's becoming way more difficult to control the load. So he's pulling excessively, unnecessarily harder than he should at the bottom. He also doesn't really have much space to move. As most of you know, there's not much room at the bottom of a tower. It's very busy. So the closer the load gets to the top, he has less control. It's still control, but less control, and Bob continues to lift. Now, unfortunately, bang, the antenna hits the tower. Bang, bash, it hits antennas or dishes on the way up. Now, there's not much you can do about that. Maybe lift it slower so the damage is less. And this, unfortunately, as I speak to you, is happening. It is really happening on our sites, whether it's done intentionally, which I don't think it is, or unintentionally. That's up to whoever's doing the investigation after the fact. So please do not drop the call and go and fix this problem that I've highlighted. Just stay on the call, please, 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 and let me finish the presentation so I can give you enough information to help you for future projects.
Ryan,
so let's have a look. Yes, sorry, Andrew.
Ryan, while you're there, could you be done in 5 minutes just so that we can wrap up this session?
100%. So specification. So quick. Thanks, Heinrich. On the left, you have the image, typical gym pole assembly on a tower. That's ideal setup. And with that in mind, it gives you a clearance of between 700 millimeters and 800 millimeters from tower to load. So that gives you quite a bit of space to be able to avoid any antenna or equipment on the existing tower lifting it past. On the right, you can see a label. That label comes with the tower with instructions. Now, the working load limit on that is 200 kgs maximum. So quick question, if you guys can drop your answers in the comment section. The one-to-one system loads 200 kgs. What is the force imposed on that top anchor point on the gin pole? While you guys are writing your answers, I will carry on with the presentation, try and speed it up a little bit. When I practiced this yesterday, it took 35 minutes, and I don't think I can do that today. Okay, so let's have a look at it again. So the gin pole. the gin pole is able to swivel slightly from left to right. It is a mobile anchor that can allow you now to be able to use it to, say, rig here, to place your antenna there, and lift here, move it slightly to the right to avoid this dish, but left, and then once you've gotten the antenna past your rigging point, you can move it comfortably to where it needs to go. It's one of the beautiful things about the gin pole, is the ability so that it can swivel and be a mobile anchor and not fixed, so you don't have more options. The tower building industry lifting the first members. I'm going to quickly play this video for you. Let's see if I can get this right. There you can see the guys are manually lifting the first leg. There is rigging attached, but the risk is still, they're in the line of fire. The rigging that's being used hasn't taken the load yet, it's still being manually lifted. There you have about 5, 6 individuals pushing up your first leg. This is a dangerous way of doing it. This could potentially go catastrophically wrong, and they could assume that the load is being taken by the rigging, let go of the load that they're manually holding, and it could fall on them. So we want to try and avoid this. So you can see in the picture on the left, the 9-meter gin pole that I spoke about earlier, pre-rigged, the guys are safe, they're away from the load, they're away from the line of fire. There's one person using a hoist to control the system, to lift the leg safely, and why not do that every time? It's the right way to do it, so that we can ensure that our people on the ground are not going to get injured by using an engineered way to do it safely. And getting the members above your highest point. So this is now you've put the 3 legs of the tower in, and you need to carry on building the tower. There's a nice image of the 9-meter gin pole being used, the technician safely attached to the tower. All the members, diagonal, horizontal, and vertical, are slowly but surely being installed, and the gin pole just makes their lives easier. One person controlling the lift and lower, and the tagline operator moving it perfectly with precision to where it needs to go. A safe, controlled way. So why not invest a little bit of money in buying the right tools for the job, instead of allowing them to use the old conventional way and possibly on a congested tower damage new equipment and old equipment in the process. With that in mind, and to try and end as quick as possible, Heinrich, again, thank you for this opportunity. I'm a little bit less nervous now. I think when you spoke, you broke that that feeling that I was having.
I'm so glad my voice has that effect.
You have a calming effect, whereas there's a certain individual, I cannot say his name, at Gravity, that has the opposite effect with me, but I do respect him and admire the man. So our goal is to improve on safety, to improve and help people be more efficient on site, and ensure that through proper safe practices and being efficient, saving the company money at the end of the day, because we are all in this to create employment, to build a life where we make money and generate money and so on and so forth, but not take away from quality. So although those 3 things need to be our primary goals, to have safe, efficient, and quality sites, people, and equipment to ensure that we do the job right the first time. A faster, safer, cost-effective, cost-saving solution that helps our clients achieve the best possible outcomes. Thank you, Heinrich.
No, thank you to you, Ryan. That was brilliant. I really appreciate that. And it's always so good to look at the practical implications of our jobs. You know, how do we practically make it better? And you closed off so nicely with not only safety, it is important, but quality and efficiency to save time and money as well. That's what we have to do. So really thank you for that, Ryan. We looked this morning at
Pleasure.
a bit of real life scenarios. Thanks, Andrew. We looked at admin processes that we can put in place. Thanks, Johan. And this gym poll is a practical implementation of that. One of the things that, Johan, I will be with you in a minute. I see there's millions of questions coming through. One of the things that Andrew mentioned was, why are the guys climbing unsafe? We put so much effort into it. We put training, we put management in it and supervision, but yet we find people climbing unsafe. So let me quickly, I made a safety survey that I also put in the chat box. So if you scroll all the way up past the millions of chats and questions, you'll see there's a link to a safety survey. And I mentioned 4 things. I said, either people are climbing unsafe because of a lack of knowledge, they don't know how to work safely, which is sometimes the case. Other times they do have the knowledge, they do have the training, but they don't have the equipment. They're not equipped. So you can't use a safe seat belt in your car if your car doesn't have one. Thirdly, they are trained, they are equipped, but too much work pressure. And this morning I had a discussion with a friend of mine that said that is one of the reasons that he's realizing is happening on site. There's just so much work pressure that they are forced to not work safely. And then lastly, they have the equipment, they have the training, they have management support, but they just don't care. Like Andrew said, it's just they don't care. So I want to encourage you after this call, let's just finish this call, to fill in the safety survey. It's fairly easy. You could also jot down your thoughts if there's any other reasons. So fill out the safety survey and put a percentage for me next to each one of those points. So it could be 25% each, if you don't count the 5th point. It could be 10, 10, and then whatever. But obviously your percentage total can't exceed 100. So I'd love for you to find that link, fill out that survey, and we can get feedback from you guys, because it's also so helpful for us to know what can we address in the industry to make it safer. So without further ado, that's us. We're going to go into some questions. There's my details if you need to contact me. Johan, we've got a couple of minutes left, very few, and we can go over time a little bit. If you need to drop, thank you so much for joining. We really appreciate that. But hang on for another couple of minutes and let's see what questions we've got on the line. Johan.
Okay, great. Thanks, Andrew. I've been looking at the questions that are posed. Obviously, there's quite a lot, and there has been answers already posted. I've got a question from Zukisani, and the question is about the minimum requirement for work at height. Is it 2 meters, 1 meter? What is the issue? So the South African blueprint says that the moment you are exposed to a fall risk, then you need to wear full protection equipment or use a full protection system. So his contra argument was like, okay, but what about if I use a shock absorber, then I need 6 meters below me? And I'm paraphrasing now. So my answer to that is, we have to use the equipment as per the manufacturer's requirement. So if I'm working on a lower level, I need to put my shock absorbers as high as possible, so that when I fall, I literally have a short distance before they interact. And then if that can't be done, then I need to look at a different fall protection system. So looking at the vertical lifeline, for instance, or a retractable lanyard. But in my experience, the biggest thing is manage the height of your shock absorbers. If they're always above your chest and higher, your fall distance below you becomes a lot shorter. So that's my answer to Sukizani's question. Then we've got another question. I want to do two more, but
Well, while you on that, does Andrew want to say something? I think specifically to the cat ladders.
Yeah, thanks, Heinrich. I've been answering questions as they've been appearing, or the ones that are directly relevant that I could answer. The cat ladders, they're dangerous. Use your double lanyards. I would not have any cat ladders on any ladders to access the top of a tower. What happens is people think they're safe. They don't use their fixed fall arrest protection equipment. They climb up, they fall off, they break all their limbs as they're falling down, and they still die anyway. Apologies for being blunt.
no, it's
100%. So
fact.
sorry to quickly interrupt. The cat ladders, essentially, it's not a fall protection equipment, and I'm maybe reiterating what Andrew said. Many people think it is. Essentially, if you have a cat ladder and you can lean back and put your back against it and rest your arms, that's great. But you have to have your safeties connected, and that's actually the reason for a cat ladder. It's not going to stop you. You're gonna go falling down and bouncing as you go down. Yeah.
And breaking limbs. There's someone, Heinrich, called Emma, who's put their hand up. I'm not sure whether you can unmute or just let them put it in the chat. If you can do the unmute, try it.
I'm going to try that. Whilst I'm doing that, Johan, is there another question that you specifically want to?
Yes, there's two. One is what is the minimum requirement of a supervisor for working at height, and I'll add rigging to that. So the best answer is that if we use the blueprint again, a person must be competent to supervise, and he must be familiar with the legal requirements. So in my mind, it means that supervisor must be able to identify and understand the hazards per task before work starts. It's as simple as that. So does he need to be an expert welder? No, but he needs to understand what the implied risks are for welding. So that's the minimum requirement for a supervisor. So if he supervises work that's work at height, I would say to understand the risks, he must do at least full rest and basic rescue. So that's the one part. And the next one is, there's a question from Mr. H.J. Butters. His question is about the medical. What must the medical contain? So the first point again is the medical must be done by a competent person. And then when you submit this person for a medical, you must clearly state what the risks are that he is going to be exposed to. Will he be driving? Will he be working at height? Will he be working in a dusty environment? If there's chlorine gas, for instance, then asthma would be something that the professional would look at. And again, there's company policy from lessons learned in terms of what is the needed requirement? What do I need to look at specifically? So for work at height, I would say the minimum things are any blood sugar levels, any blood pressure levels, epilepsy, basically anything that can cause you to lose control over yourself and lose your balance. So that's the short answer for that.
Johan,
I'm finished.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Emma, I did make it possible for you to unmute yourself if you can do that. And same with Bongani. While they're doing that, I see Michael Sebaka says he's been using a gym pole for quite long, and it's safe and good for rigging and lifting. So that's a good testimony. Thanks for that, Michael. Emma, are you able to unmute there? All right, thank you for the hand clap, Emma. Bongani, do you want to say something?
Thanks for the training. The question on my side, I need to check, do you have any guideline to say how many people they can work at height, or I mean climbing on site? For example, are we allowed to have one person climbing and one on the ground? Or do we have any minimum to say how many people we must have if anyone is climbing? Thanks.
Heinrich, I'll answer that first and let you come in, sir. The direct answer to your question is there must always be 2 competent, qualified climbers as a minimum on any site. There is no maximum. And some sites have seen 7 people. Not all are on the tower at any one time, but there could be 4 or 5 on the tower working on different sectors. Minimum is 2, and they must all have the 2 have their gear on. When I say their gear, their harnesses and lanyards. The second person is in the event of a rescue requirement. Heinrich, do you want to say anything?
Yep, you got it right, Andrew. So obviously both people that's on site needs, if both are climbing, they both need full arrest and rescue training. So in the case that one person passes out, the other can save him. But you've got the Nokia standard, you've got the Vodacom and the Vodafone standards, and so many standards for the customers that you are working for, ATC, and so as you also need to look at that. They oftentimes do stipulate, for specific jobs, you need specific amount of people. The big consideration at the end of the day is, what is the job that you're doing? Are you going to take photos on the tower, or do quality insurance on the tower, so you're not doing heavy lifting and rigging? Perhaps only 2 people is sufficient. But if you're installing if you're doing a complicated lift, well, 4, 5, 6, depending on the job requirement, but minimum is always 2. Hope that answers your question, Bongani.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
I'm going to take one more question. It's already 8 minutes past, and then we're going to call it a day. Zukisani, do you want me to unmute you? I see you've been asking a lot of questions, so I'm going to allow your mic. Zukisani, you can unmute yourself.
All right. Thank you so much. I'm not going to be long. Morning, everybody. So I just wanted to find out, maybe you might have answered my question, but I was on a call now. I had to take a call. With regards to this fall protection plan, the validity period of that, especially when your activities don't change, is on the same activities that occur, taking into consideration that we don't have legislation and the IWH is a voluntary body. I was hoping by now we would have that body as well being recognized, like the SACP CMP. So my question is based on that, the validity period or the legislation that informs us in terms of what should that validity period. Can I make my fall protection plan to be 5 years, to be valid for 5 years? Unless then there's been an incident that then occurs, only then can I then make my changes? Or is it compelled? Is it compulsory that it must be a year, and then after a year I need to change that? I just wanted clarity on that. Thanks.
I can answer that, but I do think Johan would be best suited to answer that. And Johan, I think
also, before Johan comes in, I need to be very clear there. A fall protection plan should be reviewed, even if it's just a visual review every time you go to a site, because circumstances change.
Mm.
Yeah,
Johan?
I would definitely agree with Andrew there that there are certain triggers. You'll see them in my slideshow for a fall protection plan review trigger. They are the normal ones. So any legislation, task, site, team, equipment, conditions, incidences, or near misses. But the biggest thing for me is if there's a risk change, a risk exposure change, then you have to decide how you will address that. But typically in all the ISO 9000 requirements, annual revision is a good way of doing it. And again, we are taking it as an example. But my personal opinion is the moment the risk changes, that significantly influences your full protection plan, your training, your medicals, your equipment that you are going to use, the rescue method that you are going to use, then you need to change the plan. And specifically for rope access workers, the legislation or the regulation in South Africa says that every site must have a different full protection plan, a site-specific full protection plan. So if you're doing rope access, sorry, you don't have a chance. You have to do a new plan for a rope access site if it's on a construction site. So hopefully that answers the question.
I think that does, Johan. Thank you so much. And specifically looking at the risk assessment component of the full protection plan, that is so important to update it every time. Pre-task risk assessment and so forth. Yep. So is your hand up? Do you want to say something, Johan?
Yeah, I think there was one last question, and I think it talks to both Andrew and myself. There was a question in terms of we have got everything in place, yet the employees are still not following the procedures. And if you look at Andrew's message and if you look at my message, it is basically the same. You have to address the hearts and minds and all those points that Andrew mentioned. But my point is, where do we start? We have to start somewhere. So in my opinion, the lowest hanging fruit in this situation is the supervisor must be held accountable, because people climb on his site without being connected or without following procedures because he allows it. The moment you get that right, then you can move on to the rest of the items that Andrew and myself mentioned. So we need to put the emphasis on the supervisor. It's his site, and if somebody climbs without following procedure or not being connected, he must be held accountable and face the consequences for that.
Indeed. Yeah. Thank you, Johan. Thank you, Andrew. And thank you, Ryan. It was really informative, and I hope the people on the call have something to take home or to the office with you to make some changes, to do something to better your operations and make it safer. So I will place this recording on YouTube. I'll send it to everybody that was on the call. Thank you for joining, and remember to fill in the link that I put at the top of the chat box for the safety survey. Thank you, everybody. Have a blessed day. Cheers.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.